The morning sun filtered through the weathered curtains of April Lane's bedroom. At 34, she hadn't planned on still living in her childhood home, running the family farm outside Charleston. But life had other plans. April stretched and glanced at the clock. 5:00 a.m. Another day of hard work awaited her. She slipped into her worn jeans and flannel shirt, pulled her honey brown hair into a simple ponytail, and headed downstairs. "Eli, you up?" she called softly, peeking into her brother's room. Eli, 30 years old with the mental capacity of a teenager due to a developmental disability, was already dressed and eager to start the day. "I'm ready for chicken duty," he announced proudly. April smiled. "Great, I'll make coffee while you get their feed ready." This was their life, simple, predictable, and held together by April's determination to keep what remained of their family intact after their father's death 3 years ago. The farm wasn't much. 2 acres with a modest farmhouse, a chicken coop with 48 hens, and a small garden where April grew berries and vegetables. It wasn't the culinary career she'd dreamed of in her youth, but seeing the pride on Eli's face when customers praised their eggs and homemade jams made the sacrifice worthwhile. April poured coffee into a thermos and headed out to join Eli. Together, they collected eggs, checked on the hens, and prepared for the weekly farmers market. "Look at this one," Eli said, holding up a perfectly speckled brown egg. "It's the prettiest one today," April nodded. "Put it in the special basket. Someone's going to be very lucky to get that one." By 7, they had loaded April's old pickup truck with crates of eggs, jars of strawberry and blueberry jam, and a few baskets of fresh vegetables. Every Saturday, they set up their humble stand at the Willow Street Farmers Market in downtown Charleston. "Remember, Eli," April said as they arranged their products, "small bills in the front of the cash box, and if anyone asks about the jam, hand-picked. Barry's grandma's recipe, best in Charleston," Eli recited with a grin. The market bustled with activity. Regular customers stopped by, praising April's strawberry jam and purchasing their weekly supply of eggs. It was a good day, busier than usual. By 4 o'clock, they had sold almost everything. "We did real good today, didn't we?" Eli asked, counting the money for the 3rd time. "We sure did," April replied, packing up their empty crates. "Almost. Everything's gone, except this one." Eli pointed to the special basket where a single speckled brown egg remained. April was about to pack it away when a deep voice spoke from behind her. "Is it spoken for?" She turned to find a tall man in his early 40s standing there. Unlike the casual market-goers in jeans and t-shirts, he wore crisp linen pants and a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His polished, leather boots seemed out of place among the market stalls, as did his confident smile. "Excuse me?" April asked, momentarily confused. "The egg," he said, pointing to the lone egg in the basket. "Is someone already buying it?" "Oh no, it's available." April straightened up, suddenly conscious of the dirt under her fingernails and her worn clothes. "Perfect." The man smiled. "I'll take it then, and I couldn't help but notice you're also selling jam." "We're all out of jam for today," April replied. "Sold the last jar about an hour ago." The man looked genuinely disappointed. "That's too bad. I overheard someone saying it was the best they'd ever tasted." Eli, who had been watching the exchange with interest, piped up. "It's Grandma's recipe. April makes it herself, hand-picked berries." April shot her brother a look, but the stranger seemed charmed by Eli's enthusiasm. "Is that so?" he asked, his eyes returning to April with new interest. "Well, I'll have to come back next week to try some. For now, I'll just take the egg." As April wrapped the egg carefully in paper, she noticed the man studying her. Not in the dismissive way some market-goers looked at vendors, but with genuine curiosity. "I'm Matthew Whitaker," he said, extending his hand. "I'm new to Charleston." "April." "Lane," she replied, taking his hand briefly. "And this is my brother Eli." "Nice to meet you both," Matthew said, his gaze lingering on April. "How long have you been farming?" "All my life," April answered, "but running the place ourselves for about 3 years now since our dad passed." Matthew nodded thoughtfully. "And where is your farm?" "About 20 minutes outside town, Lane Family Farm. Nothing fancy, but it's home. The best things rarely are fancy," Matthew said, a hint of something wistful in his voice. He paid for the egg, insisting on giving her a $20 bill and refusing change despite April's protests. "Consider it a down payment on next week's jam," he said with a grin that made April feel suddenly warm despite the cool autumn breeze. After he left, Eli nudged her. "He was nice. And rich, I think. Did you see his watch?" "Don't be nosy, Eli," April scolded. Gently, but she had noticed the expensive watch and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. And how, despite his obvious wealth, he'd spoken to them with genuine respect. The following week, Matthew returned to their stand just as they were setting up. This time, he bought a dozen eggs and 3 jars of strawberry jam. "This is incredible," he said after tasting a sample April offered. "The balance of sweetness and fruit, there's something different about it." April couldn't help feeling pleased. "I add a touch of lemon balm from our garden. It brightens the flavor." "You have a gift," Matthew said simply. Over the next few weeks, Matthew became a regular at their stand. Sometimes he bought eggs, sometimes jam, and sometimes he just stopped by to chat. April learned he was staying at the Harborview Hotel while visiting Charleston for business. What she didn't know was that Matthew Whitaker was the CEO of Whitaker Hospitality Group, a luxury hotel and restaurant chain known for its commitment to local, sustainable ingredients. He had come to Charleston to meet with a boutique vineyard owner about a potential partnership, intending to stay only a week. That week had somehow stretched into a month. One Saturday in late October, Matthew arrived at the market just as April and Eli were closing their stand. "I'm not too late, am I?" he asked, looking genuinely concerned. "We've got a few eggs left and 1 jar of blueberry jam," April offered. "Perfect," Matthew said. But instead of taking the items, he added, "Actually, I was wondering if you might have time for a cup of coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." April hesitated, glancing at Eli, who was watching with unabashed interest. "I can take the truck back," Eli suggested eagerly. "I've been practicing driving with Mrs. Wilson, remember?" "Eli, you don't have your license yet," April reminded him. "I could have my driver take Eli home," Matthew offered, "and then drive you home afterward, if that's all right with both of you." April was torn. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Matthew's visits had become the highlight of her market days, but another part was cautious. Men like Matthew didn't usually show interest in women like her, women with dirt-stained hands and responsibilities that left no room for romance. "It's just coffee," Matthew added softly, as if sensing her hesitation. "To talk about a business proposition." "Business?" That caught April's attention. The farm was barely breaking even. "Yes," Matthew confirmed. "I think your products have potential." Beyond the farmer's market, Eli was practically bouncing with excitement. "Say yes, April. I'll be fine with the driver." After ensuring Eli was comfortable with the arrangement, April found herself sitting across from Matthew at a charming cafe just off the market square. She felt out of place in her market clothes, especially when she noticed a few sideways glances from other patrons. Matthew, however, seemed oblivious to any disparity in their appearances. He ordered coffee for them both and got straight to the point. "I should probably tell you who I really am," he began. April's stomach tightened. "You're not actually interested in eggs and jam, are you?" Matthew laughed. "Oh, I'm definitely interested in your eggs and jam, but there's more to it." He took a breath. "I'm the CEO of Whitaker Hospitality Group. We own luxury hotels and restaurants across the country." April's eyes widened. You're that Whitaker. I read about your company in a magazine at the dentist's office." "Guilty," Matthew admitted. "I came to Charleston to meet with a vineyard owner, but then I tasted your jam and I've been intrigued ever since." "Intrigued by jam?" April asked skeptically. "By the person who made it," Matthew said, his eyes meeting hers directly. "The care you put into your products, the way you run your farm with your brother. It's the kind of authentic connection to food and community that our guests crave." April felt her cheeks warm. "So this is a business meeting?" "It could be," Matthew replied. "Our hotels pride themselves on sourcing from small, sustainable local producers. Your eggs and preserves would be perfect for our Charleston Properties breakfast service. We'd pay premium prices, of course." April's mind raced. A steady contract with a luxury hotel could provide the financial stability they desperately needed. But something didn't add up. Why me? There are dozens of farms around Charleston, many bigger and more established than mine. Matthew studied her for a moment before answering. Quality over quantity. Your products have something special, just like their maker. The way he said it made April's heart skip. Was this really just about business? I don't know, she said honestly. A contract sounds great, but I'm not sure we could handle the volume. We can start small, Matthew assured her. Just the eggs and jam for now, and if it works out, we could discuss helping you expand your operation. April took a sip of her coffee, buying time to think. Can I have some time to consider it? This is a big decision. Of course, Matthew agreed. Take all the time you need. As they finished their coffee, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. April found herself telling Matthew about her abandoned dreams of culinary school, how she'd put everything on hold when their father got sick and Eli needed her. Matthew listened intently, occasionally sharing bits of his own life. Growing up in a wealthy family but feeling disconnected from anything real, building his business with a focus on authenticity. By the time Matthew's driver arrived to take April home, 2 hours had passed. As they pulled up to her modest farmhouse, April felt suddenly self-conscious. It's not much, she said, gesturing to the weathered white clapboard house and small barn. It's perfect, Matthew replied, his voice sincere. A real home. He walked, her to the door, maintaining a respectful distance. Think about my offer. No pressure. April nodded. I will. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for the company, Matthew countered with a smile. And April, there's something special here. Not just in your products. Before she could respond, he was walking back to the car, leaving April standing on her porch with her heart pounding and her mind full of possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years. Inside, Eli was waiting eagerly. Well, are we going to be rich now? April laughed, ruffling his hair. No, but we might have a new customer, a big one. That night, after Eli went to bed, April sat on the porch swing, looking out at their small farm in the moonlight. Matthew Whitaker had walked into her life because of one lone egg in a basket, and suddenly the future seemed full of unexpected possibilities. What she didn't know was that Matthew sat in his luxury hotel room, unable to focus on work, thinking about a strong, independent woman with dirt under her fingernails and a smile that felt more genuine than anything in his carefully curated world. It was just an egg that brought them together, but it was already changing everything. The next morning, April woke earlier than usual. Her mind was filled with thoughts of Matthew's offer, and if she was honest with herself, Matthew himself. She moved through her morning chores mechanically, collecting eggs and feeding the chickens, while her thoughts drifted to his smile and the way he'd looked at her farm, not with pity but with appreciation. You're awful quiet today, Eli observed, as they ate breakfast. Are you thinking about that fancy man? April nearly choked on her coffee. I'm thinking about his business offer, Eli. It could be good for the farm. But you like him, Eli stated matter-of-factly. And I think he likes you too. He looks at you the way Dad used to look at Mom in the old pictures. Eli! April felt her cheeks flush. It's not like that. He's just being nice. Eli shrugged, unconvinced. If you say so. The week passed slowly. April found herself checking her phone more often than usual, though Matthew hadn't asked for her number. She told herself she was just eager to hear more about the potential contract with his hotel. When Saturday came, April took extra care with her appearance before heading to the market. She wore her newest jeans and a blue flannel shirt that brought out her eyes and even applied a touch of mascara, something she rarely bothered with for market days. You look pretty, Eli commented as they set up their stand. Thanks, April mumbled, suddenly self-conscious. The morning passed with no sign of Matthew. By noon, April had convinced herself he wasn't coming. Maybe the business offer had just been an excuse for coffee. Maybe he'd already left Charleston. Maybe it had all meant nothing to him. Then, just after 1 o'clock, he appeared. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman in a sleek pantsuit walked beside him, clipboard in hand. Good afternoon, April, Matthew greeted her warmly. This is Sophia Chen, the executive chef at our Charleston property. Nice to meet you, April said, suddenly feeling underdressed. Sophia's handshake was firm. Matthew hasn't stopped talking. About your preserves, I had to come see for myself. For the next half hour, Sophia tasted April's jams, examined her eggs, and asked detailed questions about her production methods. April answered honestly, explaining the small scale of her operation and her commitment to quality over quantity. We can work with this, Sophia finally said, turning to Matthew. Start with breakfast service and the executive suite welcome baskets. Matthew nodded, looking pleased. That's what I was thinking. He turned to April. What do you think? Ready? To become a supplier for Whitaker Grand Charleston? April felt overwhelmed. I'd need to see the details, how many eggs and jars per week, the payment terms. Of course, Matthew replied, impressed by her business sense. Sophia has prepared a preliminary proposal. The chef handed April a folder. Look it over, we can adjust as needed. I'll do that, April promised, tucking the folder under her counter. Perfect, Matthew said. And now, if you two don't mind, I'd like to purchase some eggs and jam for my personal use. Sophia excused herself, saying she had other vendors to meet. Once she was gone, Matthew's professional demeanor softened. I'm sorry I didn't come by earlier this week, he said. I had to fly to New York for an emergency board meeting. You don't owe me explanations, April said quickly, though she felt relieved. Maybe not, Matthew conceded, but I wanted to give you one anyway. He paused. I was wondering if you might be free for dinner tomorrow night, to discuss the proposal, of course. April hesitated. I don't know. Sundays are busy with farm work and Eli. Bring Eli, Matthew suggested immediately. I'd love to have you both. There's a great restaurant at the hotel with a view of the harbor. Before April could think of another excuse, Eli appeared beside her, having overheard the conversation. We'd love to come, he exclaimed. April never goes anywhere nice. Matthew grinned. Then it's settled. I'll send a car for you both at 6. After he left, April tried to be angry at Eli's interference but couldn't manage it. The truth was she wanted to go. It had been so long since she'd done anything just for herself, just for pleasure. That evening, April read through Sophia's proposal. The terms were generous, far better than what she got selling at the market. The hotel wanted to start with 5 dozen eggs and 10 jars of jam per week, with the possibility of increasing the order as needed. We should do it, Eli said firmly when she explained it to him. Dad would want us to. April knew he was right. Their father had always taught them to take calculated risks, to believe in the value of what they produced. The next evening, a sleek black car arrived precisely at 6. The driver, a friendly older man named James, insisted on opening the doors for both April and Eli, making Eli giggle with delight. April had spent the afternoon fretting over her limited wardrobe. She'd finally settled on her only dress, a simple, navy blue wrap that she normally saved for special occasions. She'd left her hair down and even applied a touch of lipstick. When they arrived at the Whitaker Grand Charleston, April's breath caught. The hotel was a beautifully restored historic building overlooking the harbor. The lobby gleamed with marble and crystal chandeliers, making her feel instantly out of place. Ms. Lane, the concierge greeted her warmly. Mr. Whitaker is expecting. Will you please follow me? They were led to a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. Matthew stood when they entered, his eyes taking in April's appearance with obvious appreciation. You look beautiful, he said simply, causing April to blush. This place is fancy, Eli exclaimed, looking around in wonder. Matthew laughed. It is, but I promise the food is worth it. Dinner was a revelation. The chef had prepared a special menu featuring local ingredients, including a starter of toast points with April's strawberry jam, paired with a local cheese. Eli was treated with the same respect as any guest, his questions about the hotel answered patiently by Matthew. As they enjoyed dessert, a delicate lemon tart, Matthew turned the conversation to business. Have you had a chance to review the proposal? He asked. April nodded. It's very generous, but I have to ask, why me? Why our little farm? Matthew set down his fork. When I started this company, I made a promise to myself that we would prioritize quality and authenticity over mass production. Your products have both, he paused. And truthfully, I admire what you're doing, keeping your family farm alive, taking care of your brother, refusing to compromise on quality even when it would be easier. April felt something warm unfurl in her chest. That means a lot coming. From someone like you. Someone like me, Matthew raised an eyebrow. Successful, polished, a big city CEO type. Matthew laughed. I wasn't always this polished, as you put it. I grew up on a farm too, actually. You did? April was surprised. My grandfather's place in Virginia. Much bigger than yours, I'll admit. But that's where I learned the value of good, honest work and real food. His expression grew wistful. I've lost touch with that part of myself. Being around you and your farm, it reminds me of what matters. The vulnerability in his voice touched April deeply. For the first time, she saw past the expensive clothes and CEO title to the man underneath. After dinner, Matthew suggested a walk along the harbor promenade. Eli was starting to yawn, so Matthew arranged for James to take him back to the hotel lobby, where he could watch the massive saltwater aquarium while April and Matthew took a short walk. The night was cool and clear, the water reflecting the lights of the city. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Matthew spoke. So, do we have a deal? Will Lane Family Farm become a supplier for Whitaker Hospitality? April smiled. Yes, I think it's the right move for us. I'm glad, Matthew said, his hand briefly touching hers as they walked. The contact, though fleeting, sent a jolt of awareness through April. Can I ask you something personal, she ventured. Of course. You're successful, handsome, clearly wealthy. Why aren't you married? Or are you? She added hurriedly, suddenly, realizing she'd never asked. Matthew's expression clouded. No, I'm not married. I was engaged once, about 5 years ago. He paused. It didn't end well. I'm sorry, April said softly. Her name was Victoria. She came from the same world I did. Old money, private schools, the right connections. Everyone said we were perfect together. He sighed. 2 weeks before the wedding, I discovered she'd been feeding information about pending acquisitions to a competitor. She was using me to help her father's business. April gasped. That's terrible. It was. The scandal nearly destroyed my company's reputation, and it taught me not to trust easily. He looked at her directly. Until now. The intensity of his gaze made April look away. I'm just a farm girl with dirt under her nails, not exactly in a position to threaten your business empire. You're far more than that, April Lane, Matthew said quietly, and I think you know it. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Eli saying he was getting tired. They turned back toward the hotel, the moment broken but not forgotten. As James drove them home, Eli fell asleep against April's shoulder. She gazed out the window at the passing city lights, her mind replaying Matthew's words. You're far more than that. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could have more than the life she'd resigned herself to. The next few weeks brought significant changes to Lane Family Farm. With the hotel contract secured, April invested in additional feed and supplies. Matthew stopped by the farm occasionally, always under the pretense of checking on his supplier, but he often stayed for hours, helping with chores or simply sitting on the porch with April, talking. You don't have to do this, you know, April told him one Saturday after he'd spent the morning helping her repair a section of fencing. I'm sure CEOs have better things to do with their weekends. Matthew wiped sweat from his brow, looking more relaxed in jeans and a t-shirt than April had ever seen him. There's nowhere I'd rather be, he said simply, and April believed him. Something was happening between them, something slow and careful and true. Matthew never pushed, never presumed, but his eyes followed her with unmistakable warmth. Eli adored him. Matthew treated him with respect, teaching him about business and bringing him books about farming and cooking. One evening, Matthew arrived with a special gift, a professional set of kitchen knives for April. I remember you said you wanted to go to culinary school, he explained as she unwrapped them. Just because that dream is on hold doesn't mean you can't keep cooking. April, was touched beyond words. No one had acknowledged her deferred dreams in years. As November arrived, Matthew invited April and Eli to a special harvest dinner at the hotel, where the menu would feature their eggs and preserves. April accepted, her usual caution giving way to growing feelings she could no longer deny. The event was elegant but warm, with local farmers and producers mingling with hotel executives. April wore a new dress for the occasion, a simple emerald green wrap that Matthew had sent over as a thank you for being such a valuable partner. During dinner, Matthew stood to make a toast. To our local partners, who make it possible for us to offer our guests an authentic taste of Charleston. His eyes found April's across the room, and the look they exchanged was full of promise. Later, as a small band played and couples took to the dance floor, Matthew approached her. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. April hesitated, only briefly before taking it. "I'm not very good at this. Neither am I," Matthew confessed as he led her to the floor. "But I think we'll manage just fine together." As they swayed to the music, April felt the barriers she'd built around her heart begin to crumble. Matthew held her carefully, respectfully, but there was no mistaking the intensity in his eyes. "I'm leaving for New York next week," he said softly. "The board meeting I can't miss." April's heart sank. "How long will you be gone?" "At least 2 weeks. There's a major acquisition we're finalizing." He paused. "I'd like to keep in touch while I'm away. Maybe actually get your phone number this time," April laughed. "I thought you'd never ask." As the song ended, they remained close for a moment longer than necessary. April could feel the warmth of his hand at the small of her back, see the question in his eyes as he looked down at her. But before anything could happen, they were interrupted by Sophia, who needed Matthew's input on something. The moment passed, but the connection between them remained electric and undeniable. The night ended with Matthew walking April and Eli to the waiting car. Eli climbed in first, giving them a moment alone. "Thank you for coming tonight," Matthew said, standing close enough that April could smell his cologne, a subtle scent of pine and spice. "Thank you for inviting us," April replied, suddenly shy. Matthew reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll call you from New York." "I'd like that," April whispered. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply intimate. "Good night, April Lane," he said softly. "Good night, Matthew Whitaker," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. As the car pulled away, April touched her hand where his lips had been, her heart racing with possibilities. What had started with a single egg in a basket was blooming into something neither of them had expected, something that both thrilled and terrified them in equal measure. And in New York, powerful forces waited that would test this fragile new connection in ways neither could imagine. The day after the harvest dinner, April woke to a text message from Matthew. "Good morning. Just wanted to say I'm already looking forward to seeing you again when I return from New York." April smiled, clutching the phone to her chest like a teenager. At 34, she'd thought those butterfly feelings were long behind, her replaced by the practical concerns of running the farm and caring for Eli. But Matthew had awakened something in her she'd thought was gone forever. "Someone's happy," Eli observed as he entered the kitchen. "Is that Matthew texting you?" April put her phone down. "Yes, and don't be nosy." "I'm not being nosy. I'm being observant," Eli replied with a grin. "Dad always said there's a difference." April laughed, ruffling his hair as she passed him to pour coffee. "You're too smart for your own good." "He's good for you," Eli said more seriously. "You smile more now." April couldn't deny it. In the weeks since Matthew had entered their lives, things had changed. Not just the hotel contract, which had brought welcome financial stability, but her outlook. For years, she'd focused solely on survival, keeping the farm running, making sure Eli was cared for. Matthew had reminded her there could be more to life. The days passed quickly with Matthew in New York. They spoke every evening, their conversations growing deeper and more personal. Matthew told her about his childhood on his grandfather's farm, his complicated relationship with his parents, who wanted him to pursue politics rather than business, and the betrayal that had left him wary of relationships. April shared stories, Of her mother who had died when she was a teenager, her dreams of opening a small farm-to-table cafe, and her fears about whether she was doing enough for Eli. "You've given up so much for him," Matthew observed during one late-night call. "It's not giving up if it's for someone you love," April replied simply. There was a pause before Matthew said softly, "You're an extraordinary woman, April Lane." 2 weeks stretched into 3. The acquisition Matthew's company was pursuing had complications, requiring him to stay in New York longer than planned. April tried not to feel disappointed, reminding herself that his world was very different from hers. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, as April was checking on the chickens, a sleek black car pulled up to the farmhouse. Her heart leapt, thinking Matthew had returned early. Instead, a woman stepped out, unfurling an umbrella against the drizzle. She was tall and model-esque, wearing a tailored coat that probably cost more than April earned in 3 months. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her red-soled heels sank slightly into the muddy yard. "Can I help you?" April called, walking over while wiping her hands on her jeans. The woman looked April up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I'm looking for Matthew Whitaker. I was told he spends time here." April felt instantly on guard. "He's in New York on business. Who's asking?" "Victoria Pemberton," the woman replied with a tight smile. "His fiancée." April felt as though she'd been doused in ice water. "Fiancée?" "Former fiancée," Victoria clarified. "Though if things go as planned at the board meeting today, we'll be back on track." She looked around at the modest farm. "So this is what's been keeping him in Charleston. I had wondered." April struggled to maintain her composure. "Mr. Whitaker and I have a business relationship. My farm supplies his hotel." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Of course, how quaint." She opened her designer handbag and extracted a business card, holding it out between 2 manicured fingers. "When Matthew returns, please tell him I stopped by. The board is quite interested in my father's offer." April took the card mechanically. "I'll let him know." "Do," Victoria said, turning to go. She paused, looking back at April with something almost like pity. "A word of advice? Matthew has always had a weakness for authenticity. He finds it charming. But in the end, he always returns to where he belongs." Before April could respond, Victoria was back in her car, which pulled away, leaving muddy tire tracks in the yard. April stood in the rain, clutching Victoria's card, feeling foolish and small. Of course, Matthew had been keeping in touch with his ex-fiancée. Of course, he belonged in that world of wealth and power. What had she been thinking? When Eli found her still standing there minutes later, she quickly wiped away her tears and forced a smile. "Who was that lady?" Eli asked. "Just someone looking for Matthew," April replied, tucking the card into her pocket. "Let's get back to work." That night when Matthew called, April let it go to voicemail. She listened to his message, warm and filled with plans for his return in 2 days, and felt her heart break a little. She texted him instead. "Too tired to talk tonight. Your friend Victoria stopped by. Said to tell you she's looking forward to the board's decision tomorrow." Matthew called immediately. This time, April answered. "What did Victoria say to you?" he demanded without preamble. "Not much," April replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Just that she was your fiancée and that the board was interested in her father's offer." "Ex-fiancée," Matthew corrected firmly. "April, listen to me. Victoria's father is trying to buy a controlling interest in my company. That's what this trip has been about, fighting off their hostile takeover attempt." April wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. "She seemed very confident about your future together." "There is no future with Victoria," Matthew said, his voice hard. "She betrayed me once. I'm not giving her a second chance." "It's really none of my business," April said quietly. "We have a supplier contract, that's all." There was a long pause before Matthew spoke again, his voice gentler. "Is that really all we have, April?" April closed her eyes, fighting tears. "I don't know what we have, Matthew. You live in a world of corporate takeovers and board meetings. I live in a farmhouse with a leaky roof and chickens that need feeding at dawn." Maybe Victoria was right. You might find this authentic life charming for a while, but eventually you'll go back where you belong. "Don't tell me where I belong," Matthew said, an edge of anger in his voice. I've spent my whole life with people telling me that. My parents wanted me in politics. Victoria wanted me as a business connection. Everyone has an opinion on who Matthew Whitaker should be and what he should want. And what do you want? April asked softly. I want, Matthew began, then stopped. This isn't a conversation we should have over the phone. I'll be back in Charleston on Thursday. Can we talk then? Really talk? April hesitated. Okay, Thursday. After they hung up, April sat on the porch swing watching the rain. For a moment, she'd allowed herself to believe in possibilities beyond the boundaries of her small life. Now she felt foolish for dreaming. Thursday arrived with clear skies and a crispness in the air that hinted at the approaching winter. April went about her chores mechanically, trying not to watch the clock or the driveway. It was mid-afternoon when she heard a car approaching. She looked up from weeding the winter vegetable patch to see a familiar black sedan pulling up. Her heart hammered as Matthew stepped out, looking tired but determined. He walked directly to where she knelt in the garden, not seeming to care about the mud on his expensive shoes. April, he said simply. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. Matthew, how was New York? Productive. We defeated the takeover attempt. His eyes never left her face. But that's not what I came to talk about. April took a deep breath. Would you like some coffee? Eli made a fresh pot before he left for his therapy session. Matthew nodded, following her to the porch. They sat at the small table where they'd shared many conversations over the past months, but today there was a tension that hadn't existed before. Victoria and I were engaged 5 years ago, Matthew began after taking a sip of coffee. When I discovered her betrayal, I called off the wedding and thought that was the end of it. But her father has been trying to gain control of my company ever since. Why? April asked. Revenge, partly, but also because our hotel properties occupy prime real estate he'd love to redevelop into luxury condominiums. Matthew's expression hardened. I've built my business on preserving historic properties and supporting local communities. Richard Pemberton would tear all that down for a quick profit. And Victoria, what does she want? Matthew's laugh was bitter. Victoria wants what her father wants. She always has. That's something I didn't understand until it was almost too late. He reached across the table, his hand covering April's. What? I want what I've always wanted is something real, something that matters. I found that here with you. April withdrew her hand. Matthew, you've been wonderful to us. The contract with your hotel has made such a difference, but we're from different worlds. That's exactly why this matters, Matthew insisted. My world is full of people like Victoria, calculating, always looking for an angle. You're the most genuine person I've ever met. So I'm a novelty, April said quietly. The authentic farm girl experience. Matthew looked stung. Is that what you think? That I see you as some kind of rural tourism? Before April could respond, they heard Eli's voice calling from the driveway where Mrs. Wilson had dropped him off after therapy. Matthew, you're back! Eli bounded onto the porch, his face lighting up. Matthew stood to greet him, his smile genuine despite the tension with April. Hey buddy, how are you doing? Great. Mrs. Wilson says I'm making real progress with my driving. I might be able to take the test soon. That's fantastic, Matthew said, giving Eli a high five. I never doubted you for a second. April watched. Their interaction with a lump in her throat. Eli had grown so attached to Matthew. If things ended badly between them, it wouldn't just be her heart at risk. Eli, could you go check on the chickens? I think I heard them making a fuss earlier, April asked. Eli looked between them, sensing the tension. Sure, but don't send me away just so you two can argue. You both look upset. We're just talking, Eli, April assured him. It's complicated grown-up stuff. Once Eli reluctantly left, Matthew turned back to April. He knows me pretty well already. He's always been good at reading people, April acknowledged. It's one of his gifts. April, Matthew said, his voice low and urgent. I need you to believe that what I feel for you is real. When I'm with you, I'm the person I want to be, not the person everyone else expects me to be. April wanted to believe him. The sincerity in his eyes, the way he looked at her as if she were precious, it was everything she'd never allowed herself to want. I'm scared, she admitted. Not just for me, but for Eli. He adores you. If this is just a phase for you, a break from your real life, this is my real life, Matthew interrupted fiercely. The board meetings, the acquisitions, that's the job I do, not who I am. He took her hands in his. Who I am is the man who loves the way your eyes crinkle when you laugh. The man who respects how hard you work and how deeply you care for your brother. The man who can't imagine going back to a life without April Lane in it. April's breath caught. Matthew, I'm not asking for any promises, he continued. I know we still have a lot to learn about each other. All I'm asking is that you give us a chance, a real chance. There was so much hope in his eyes, so much vulnerability beneath the successful CEO exterior. April's walls began to crumble. Okay, she said softly. A chance. The smile that broke across Matthew's face was like sunrise. He leaned forward, his hand gently cupping her cheek. That's all I need. When his lips met hers, it was a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. April found herself melting into it, the last of her doubts fading away. From the chicken coop, Eli watched with a grin. Finally, he whispered to the curious hens, those two were making me crazy. The weeks that followed were the happiest of April's adult life. Matthew divided his time between Charleston and New York, but whenever he was in town, he spent most of his free time at the farm. He helped with chores, learned about chicken care from Eli, and even took cooking lessons from April in her small kitchen. As Christmas approached, Matthew surprised them by showing up one evening with a large Douglas fir strapped to the roof of his car. I thought we could decorate it together, he suggested as Eli danced around in excitement. That night, as they hung ornaments on the tree, some store-bought by Matthew, others handmade years ago by April and Eli with their parents, April felt a sense of completeness she hadn't experienced since her father died. Later, after Eli went to bed, April and Matthew sat on the couch, looking at the twinkling lights of the tree. I have something to show you, Matthew said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. A business idea I wanted your opinion on. April raised an eyebrow. My opinion on a Whitaker hospitality venture? I'm flattered but hardly qualified. Actually, it would be a Lane venture, Matthew said, handing her the folder. With some backing from a silent partner. Confused, April opened the folder to find architectural drawings of a small cafe attached to a farm stand. The header read, April Lane's Harvest Cafe. What is this? She asked, her heart racing. An idea. Your idea, actually. Matthew's eyes were bright with excitement. Remember when you told me about your dream of opening a farm-to-table cafe? I had an architect draw up what it might look like if we built it here on your land. April flipped through the pages in disbelief. The designs were beautiful, rustic yet elegant, clearly built to showcase local ingredients and traditional cooking methods. Matthew, this is... I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, he urged. The silent partner, that would be me, would provide startup capital, but it would be your cafe, April, your menu, your vision. I can't accept this. April protested. It's too much. It's not a gift, Matthew insisted. It's an investment in you and your talent. I've tasted your cooking. I've seen how you light up when you talk about food. This is the dream you put aside to take care of everyone else. Maybe it's time to reclaim it. April stared at the plans, her mind racing. What about Eli? The farm. The cafe would be right here on the property. Eli could help as much or as little as he wants to, and the farm would supply the cafe with eggs, produce, jams. Matthew squeezed her hand. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. April nodded, overwhelmed by the possibility that her long-abandoned dream might actually come true. As she leaned against Matthew's chest, looking at the twinkling Christmas tree, April felt a sense of wonder. 6 months ago, she'd been barely keeping the farm afloat. Her days a cycle of work and worry. Now, because of one lone egg in a basket and the man who'd asked if it was spoken for, her life had opened up in ways she'd never imagined possible. What she couldn't know was that back in New York, forces were gathering that threatened everything she and Matthew were building together. Victoria Pemberton hadn't given up, and she had one final card to play. Christmas passed in a blur of warm moments. Eli's delight over the new tablet Matthew gave him, April's shocked tears when she unwrapped a professional chef's coat with April Lane's Harvest Cafe embroidered on the pocket, and quiet evenings by the fire discussing plans for the future. By early January, April had cautiously agreed to move forward with the cafe idea. Matthew's architectural team began working on detailed plans, positioning the small restaurant to take advantage of the farm's natural beauty while maintaining its rustic charm. "We should break ground in March," Matthew told her one snowy evening, as they reviewed the finalized plans at her kitchen table. Just in time for the tourist season, April nodded, still not quite believing this was happening. "I've been working on menu ideas," she admitted, sliding a notebook toward him. Matthew flipped through the pages of handwritten recipes with obvious delight. Farm breakfast bowls, seasonal preserves with house-made biscuits, chicken pot pie with eggs from your own hens. "April, this is exactly what I envisioned." April blushed at his praise. "It's simple food, nothing fancy." "It's honest food," Matthew corrected. "Food with a story and a connection to this place. That's what people are hungry for. Not just the meal, but the meaning behind it." Their eyes met across the table, and April felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Over the past months, what had begun as cautious attraction had deepened into something profound. Matthew had become integrated into their lives, respectful of April's independence but steadfast in his support. "I have to go back to New York tomorrow," Matthew said, reaching for her hand. "Final quarterly board meeting, but I'll be back by the weekend." April nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. These business trips were part of his life, part of what made him who he was. "We'll be here," she said with a smile. The next morning, April drove Matthew to the airport. Their goodbye kiss was lingering, neither wanting to part. "I love you," Matthew said quietly, the first time he'd spoken the words aloud, though they'd been evident in his actions for months. April's heart soared. "I love you too." She watched his plane take off, feeling both happiness and a strange unease she couldn't explain. Maybe it was just the natural fear that came with so much change, so much happiness, after years of simply getting by. 2 days later, that unease proved justified. April was in the chicken coop collecting eggs when she heard a car pull up. Expecting it to be Mrs. Wilson bringing Eli home from his volunteer job at the local library, she was surprised to see a black town car. Instead, her first thought was that Matthew had returned early, but it wasn't him who stepped out. It was Victoria Pemberton, this time accompanied by an older man in an expensive suit. "Ms. Lane," Victoria called, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I hope we're not interrupting your farm activities." April straightened, basket of eggs in hand. "What do you want, Miss Pemberton?" "Allow me to introduce my father, Richard Pemberton," Victoria said, gesturing to the older man. "He's quite interested in your little arrangement with Matthew." Richard Pemberton's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Charming place you have here, Ms. Lane. Very rustic." "Thank you," April replied stiffly. "If you're looking for Matthew, he's in New York for your board meeting." Richard's eyebrows rose. "Our board meeting? I'm afraid you're mistaken. I resigned from the Whitaker Hospitality Board last month after our unsuccessful acquisition attempt." April frowned. "Then why are you here?" Victoria extracted a manila envelope from her designer handbag. "We thought you might want to see these before you go any further with your cafe project." April set down her egg basket and took the envelope. Inside were photographs. Matthew at a New York restaurant with Victoria, both dressed elegantly and sitting close together. Another showed them entering what appeared to be an apartment building, Victoria's hand on Matthew's arm. "These are from this week," Victoria said smoothly. "While he's supposedly at board meetings." April's heart pounded. "These don't prove anything. Business dinners happen all the time." Of course, Richard agreed with false sympathy. "And I suppose the lease agreement for April Lane's Harvest Cafe filed 6 months ago, well before he ever met you, is also just business." He handed her another document, a copy of a business filing dated July 15th, months before Matthew had ever tasted her jam or bought her egg. "I don't understand," April said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's quite simple," Victoria explained with poisonous sweetness. "Matthew has been planning to develop a chain of farm-to-table cafes for over a year. He needed an authentic face for the brand, someone with genuine farming credentials but malleable enough to be guided. When his scout found you at the farmer's market, you fit the profile perfectly. No, April shook her head. That's not true. Matthew cares about me, about us. Richard Pemberton's laugh was cold. My dear, Matthew Whitaker cares about one thing, expanding his empire. He's using you and your touching little farm as marketing tools, nothing more. He told me he loves me, April said, hating how small her voice sounded. Victoria's eyes flashed with what might have been genuine hurt. He told me the same thing 2 nights ago. Matthew is very good at saying what people need to hear. April felt sick. Could it all have been a lie? The coincidence of the last egg, his interest in her jams, his growing relationship with Eli, had it all been calculated? Why are you telling me this? She finally asked. Professional courtesy, Richard replied. Before you sign any contracts or break ground on this cafe, you should know what you're really getting into. Matthew won't be putting your name on the door out of love, Miss Lane. He'll be marketing your image while controlling everything behind the scenes, Victoria added. You'll be a figurehead, a rustic mascot for urban customers who want to feel connected to something real, but don't want actual dirt under their nails. The cruelty of her words cut deep. April tried to keep her voice steady. I think you should leave. Richard nodded, handing her his card. Think about what we've shown you. If you want out of any agreements with Matthew, call me. I have excellent lawyers. After they left, April sank onto the porch steps, the photographs and document clutched in her trembling hands. She wanted to dismiss it all as manipulation from people who had their own agenda. But the business filing with her cafe's name, dated months before they'd met, was hard to explain away. When Eli arrived home, he found her still sitting there, staring at nothing. April, what's wrong? He asked, immediately concerned. April forced a smile. Just tired, bad day. That night she couldn't sleep. Every interaction with Matthew played through her mind, now cast in a different light. Had he been assessing her all along, calculating how to use her and her farm for his brand image? She thought about calling him, but couldn't bear to hear his voice until she had sorted through her feelings. Instead, she texted a brief message. Need some time to think. Please don't come to the farm when you return. His response came almost immediately. What's happened? Talk to me, April. She turned off her phone. When a lonely farmer sells one last speckled egg, she has no idea the man buying it is a luxury hotel CEO with a secret and a plan that could change everything she thought she knew. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The next day dragged by in a fog of confusion and heartache. Eli sensed something was wrong, but knew better than to push. By evening, April had made a decision. She would confront Matthew directly when he returned, demand the truth, and then decide whether what they had built together was worth saving. She was in the kitchen making dinner when she heard a car on the gravel driveway. Looking out the window, she saw Matthew's familiar figure striding toward the house, his face set with determination. He's not supposed to be back until tomorrow, she whispered to herself, her heart racing. Before she could decide whether to meet him at the door or retreat upstairs, Eli had flung the door open. Matthew, April's been sad all day. Did you have a fight? April cringed. Trust Eli to get straight to the point. Matthew stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding April's across the room. Not a fight, he said carefully. A misunderstanding I need to clear up. April steeled herself. Eli, could you go to your room for a bit? Matthew and I need to talk. Eli looked between them, concerned. Don't yell at each other, okay? That's what Dad always said. No yelling, just talking. Once Eli was upstairs, April faced Matthew. You weren't supposed to come here. Your text scared me, Matthew replied simply. I caught the first flight back. April crossed her arms protectively. Victoria and her father paid me a visit yesterday. Matthew's expression darkened. What did they want? Without a word, April retrieved the envelope from the kitchen counter and handed it to him. Matthew looked through the contents, his jaw tightening. These photos, he said, voice controlled, were taken at a business dinner with Victoria and several other investors, who were considering backing her father's takeover attempt. I was gathering intelligence. The doorman photo is from when I escorted her to her father's apartment because she claimed to have information about the next board vote. It was a ploy to get me alone. April wanted to believe him. And this? She asked, pointing to the business filing with her cafe's name. Dated months before we ever met. Matthew's eyes widened in genuine surprise. That's not possible. He examined the document more closely, then let out a harsh laugh. This is a forgery. A good one, but still a fake. He looked up at April. The original filing was for April Harvest Cafe, named for the month, not a person. It was a concept I was exploring but shelved because it didn't feel authentic. Convenient explanation, April said, though doubt was creeping in. Check the records yourself, Matthew challenged. Call my lawyer, James Wilson. Yes, I was developing. Farm-to-table cafe concept. No, I never planned to use you as a rustic mascot or whatever garbage the Pembertons fed you. April fell silent, studying his face. The indignation in his eyes seemed genuine, but she'd been fooled before. Why would they go to so much trouble? She finally asked. Because they're desperate, Matthew replied. The board voted yesterday to permanently block any future acquisition attempts by Pemberton Holdings. Their last hope was to drive a wedge between us. Between us? Why would our relationship matter to their business plans? Matthew took a deep breath. Because yesterday I also resigned as CEO of Whitaker Hospitality Group. April gasped. You what? Why? I'm staying on the board, but stepping back from day-to-day operations. Matthew's eyes softened. I realized something during these past months with you and Eli. I built my company because I wanted to create something that preserved tradition and authenticity in a world that's increasingly artificial. But somewhere along the way, I lost touch with what that actually means. He took a step toward her. Being here, working with my hands, connecting to the land and the food it produces, I found myself again, April, the man I want to be. April felt tears threatening. So what now, you become a farmer? Matthew smiled. Not exactly, though I'm getting pretty good with those chickens. His expression grew serious again. I want to focus on smaller projects that matter. Starting with April Lane's Harvest Cafe, a real partnership between us if you'll still have me. How do I know this isn't just another line, another calculated move? April asked, her voice breaking. Matthew reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth-wrapped object. Because of this, he unwrapped it carefully, revealing a perfectly speckled brown egg, or rather half an eggshell, preserved and lined with velvet. Inside, nestled against the deep blue fabric, was a simple diamond ring. I saved it, Matthew said softly. The shell from that last egg in your basket the day we met. It wasn't planned, April. It wasn't calculated. It was just fate. April stared at the ring gleaming inside the eggshell, her heart in her throat. I had this whole speech prepared, Matthew continued, about how that egg changed everything for me. How finding you was like finding the missing piece of myself, but standing. Here now, the only words that matter are, I love you, April Lane. Every strong, stubborn, wonderful part of you. He knelt before her, holding out the egg with its precious contents. Will you build a life with me? Not just a cafe, but a home, a family, a future? April looked into his eyes and saw nothing but truth there. The truth she'd known in her heart all along. Yes, she whispered, tears flowing freely now. Yes. As Matthew slipped the ring onto her finger, they heard a muffled cheer from the stairway. Eli appeared, grinning from ear to ear. I knew it, he exclaimed. I knew he wasn't a bad guy. April and Matthew laughed through their tears, opening their arms to include Eli in their embrace. The three of them stood together in the warm kitchen, a family formed not by blood but by choice and love. 6 months later, on a perfect summer morning, April Lane's Harvest Cafe opened its doors. The small, charming restaurant quickly became a favorite for locals and tourists alike, drawn by April's simple yet exquisite farm-to-table cuisine and the warm atmosphere she and Eli created. Matthew divided his time between the cafe, the farm, and his remaining board responsibilities. He found a balance he'd never thought possible, a life rich with purpose and love. On their wedding day, held in the field behind the farmhouse with chickens occasionally wandering through the ceremony, April and Matthew exchanged vows beneath an arch of wildflowers. Eli stood proudly as best man, beaming as he handed over the rings. At the reception, held at the cafe's outdoor patio, Matthew clinked his glass for a toast. "Some of you know that our story began with an egg," he said, smiling at his bride. "One perfect speckled egg that April had saved until the very end of a market day. I asked if it was spoken for, never imagining that question would change my life forever." He raised his glass. "To last eggs and new beginnings, to finding what matters, and to the remarkable woman who taught me that the most valuable things in life aren't what we possess, but who we love." As the sun set over the farm, casting a golden glow over the celebration, April looked around at the life they had built together. From one small egg had hatched a love stronger and more real than anything she could have imagined. Later that evening, while the party continued, April slipped away to the chicken coop to check on a new clutch of eggs due to hatch. Matthew found her there, still in her wedding dress, watching as the first tiny beak broke through a shell. "New beginnings," she said softly as he wrapped his arms around her. "The best kind," he agreed, kissing her temple. Behind them, in the farmhouse that was now truly a home, Eli had put the final touches on a surprise wedding gift, a hand-painted sign for the cafe entrance. Below the elegant script of April Lane's Harvest Cafe, he had carefully added their slogan, the words that had started it all. "Is it spoken for? Every egg has a story. Every meal matters." And in the softly lit coop surrounded by new life beginning, April and Matthew sealed their own story with a kiss that tasted of promise, permanence, and the sweetest kind of love, the kind built day by day with patience, honesty, and hands that weren't afraid of hard work or tender touches. It had begun with the last egg, but their story was just hatching.